What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's talk about the kind of truth that slips through clenched teeth. Not the polished parade for Russian TV, not the valor under banners montage with choirs and medals, but the stuff that leaks out when Z veterans forget the script, when the mask slips and the camera keeps rolling. A month ago, a vlogger sat across from a masked soldier called Saint Leon. He has been wounded, brought back from the front to a draft office, and then promoted to a TikTok personality, where desperate families now beg him for help because the system that promised protection treats their sons like broken tools. Neutralize or nullify, I'm assuming guys you heard those terms already. This is what most of injured Russian soldiers can expect if they are just regular people. Even in Stalin's time, a wound could potentially redeem you. If you have been sent to a penal battalion, modern equivalent in the mid assault, and you get injured there but you survive, most of your sins would be forgiven. In modern Putin's Russia, wounded soldiers are liabilities. If everyone gets promised millions of rubles for injuries, the war would have been over in just under 1 year. I mean, there will simply not be any money left. All that are not some crazy anti-Putin conspiracy theories, no. These are real stories as told and then confirmed by multiple escaped Russian soldiers. And that is the point. You don't need opposition anymore to set the machine of dissatisfaction in motion. You only have to listen closely to the very people meant to sanctify the war. The ugly truth is showing, the euphemism I'm sleeping, and in between the curses, the boasts, and the macho posturing, the same horror repeats. There is no cause, no plan, and no way out, except in a wooden box feed forward. Leon's persona is not special anymore, to be honest. It's typical. A man from the penal system goes to the front line, gets chewed by the shrapnel, and returns with paperwork that does not match the promises. The army is supposed to evacuate him, treat him, pay him. Instead, they beat him and toss him into a pit for refusing to crawl forward on legs that no longer work. His wife asks whether she can complain to the prosecutor, and Leon immediately tells her the truth that every soldier already knows. The complaint simply might sign his own death sentence, death warrant. Neutralized is the verb that silences families and terrifies the wounded to obedience. It is the discipline by threat of disappearance. File the wrong form, call the wrong number, and you just vanish into administrative fog. Another veteran, called Saint Fizruk, an ex-PE teacher, describes dragging a man whose legs are twisted and useless away from the battle. Inside the camp, comrades walk past the injured soldier like he's a broken mannequin on the warehouse floor. One of them even threatens to neutralize the rescuer, not even the wounded soldiers, just for simply trying to save a life. This is not an act of senseless aggression, it is a learned reaction. The normal has departed. Human suffering is now background noise, triage is optional, and mercy is a liability. Of course, just a few of these interviews exists, but why? Because a few soldiers come back, and those who do, sign contracts that never end. Until victory, the paperwork literally says. A phrase as bottomless and meaningless as the graves they dig deep. The mobilized are not released, the wounded are rarely discharged, and the survivors face another enemy back home. Laws that criminalize speech, memory, and honesty. Misinformation, discreditation, the legal war paper pasted over violence. Talk too plainly about what you have seen, and your medal becomes an anchor around your neck. Is it worth to risk your life for just a couple of thousand views on TikTok? For many, that's a very stupid question. Yet the stories still leak. They always do. Reality always has a way of finding its way out. Until recently, Z veterans' interviews were mainly focusing on soldiers' lives and deaths. But not that long time ago, stories about the civilians and their treatment started seeping through the cracks as well. Let's talk about some new horrific truth as told by the Z soldiers in our next chapter. If you want a single word that captures the moral collapse, take ждуны, or waiters. Those who are waiting for something to happen, good or bad. In military slang on both sides, it just basically labels civilians. But context matters. In Ukraine, it is sometimes used for those who stayed behind. Elderly people with no savings and nowhere to go, homeowners who fear losing their apartment if they cross a checkpoint, families stuck in basements counting shells and breathing death, and so on. Some do root for Russia, believe it or not, sure, a very tiny, tired minority. But more often, they are just stuck or they are waiting for Ukraine to reclaim the town, so the property records at least still mean something. Well, now picture Svatove, Luhansk region, captured early in March 2022. Two Russian veterans chat on camera. One of them, Alexei Kuzenkov, former Moscow cop mobilized in September 2022. Later discharged on retirement age grounds and, well, he just decided to drop probably and willingly a horrible story. Such it goes as following. Comrades tossed an F1 grenade into a grocery store full of those waiters. Not drunk, deliberate, calm, measured. Then the conversation just switches in another direction like nothing happened. Like they just discussed getting wrong McDonald's order with missing Big Mac. But this word, ждуны, waiters, has already done the work. It has turned civilians, people such as standing, like once again, in front of bread and salt, into a category you can just blow up without thinking too hard. Just throw a grenade and have some laugh, and then tell the interview. But how do you tell a waiter from any other human? You don't. You label after the fact. Whoever lies bleeding must have been the enemy. Whoever complains is misinforming. Whoever asks for justice is discrediting. It is a perfect machine for laundering guilt. The only flaw is that it leaves fingerprints on every story told in the future. Years from now, when the uniforms will be hanging back in the closets and the medals are shown on school assemblies, this one single minute admission of a war crime will still exist because internet never forgets. And it will rot everything around it and every person responsible. Let's now briefly discuss the attitude of Russian officers towards its soldiers. That accidentally losing hundreds of them is not a big deal anymore. Let's talk about it in our next chapter. But Kuzenkov's tale does not end here. Remember the official Putin's promise in September 2022. The mobilized would train far from the front lines. They will be spared the meat grinder. They'll just first use shooting ranges, learn to fight, and then only slowly integrate. But in reality, many saw just one day of target practice and got shot across the line via border, via Belgorod the very next day. No gear, no weapons, no doctrine, just bodies under flag. Kuzenkov's own company, 179 men, did train longer. It looked like a rare exception, and for months they even survived without losses. Well, then came Kupiansk. Take it at any cost, the order said. That antique phrase that makes generals feel immortal and turns everyone else to just fertilizer. When the smoke cleared, 17 of them only walked away. 17. 9.5%. The other 162 never made it back home. They were erased from the payroll, from the memory, and often the compensation line. And here is where bureaucracy becomes a weapon. When two were killed by Ukrainian raid inside the Belgorod region, on Russian soil, the Ministry of Defense just played the word game. Not the zone of the special military operation, they said. Well, that's pretty much it. Therefore, no combat death, no payout, no nothing, no recognition, absolutely nothing. The families were told to just argue with the wall and, I don't know, watch paint dry. This is how you learn what the state really values. It will take your life and then haggle over which stamp to use on the certificate, died in combat or collateral damage of military-related activity. It's not like you choose, it's they choose it, and you guess what. It will ask whether your blood fell on the correct side of an imaginary line before it sends a sorry for your loss postcard. A well-trained company, once praised for discipline, gets obliterated on commander's watch. The survivors spiral into something feral. One of them tells Kuzenkov, "I'm just a beast now, I don't count people as people anymore, I count them just like numbers. 8, 7, 9, whatever." This is what this endless war does to the human nervous system. It removes empathy like a dead branch and leaves arithmetic in its place. And still, the interviews try to sell a fairy tale. They market the war as a proving ground, as a comeback of heroism, a young man's rite of passage to manhood. But real life is far from these Kremlin's promises. No training, contracts with no end date, denied compensations because the death happened on the wrong kilometer marker. The perfectly trained company reduced to 17 shadows. It's all there, hiding in the corners the propagandists hope you will never find. Cue the staged moment in central Moscow now. A famous boxer explaining for valor to a child, while a 24-year-old officer with a missing limb listens like a ghost in daylight. That officer is First Lieutenant Dmitry Kursky, ex-58th Army. He sits for a long interview with former Wagner fighter Konstantin Lugovoy, and at first it even just plays like a recruitment ad, like exactly what Kremlin wanted. He wanted in, he begged to be sent, he dreamed of joining his friends already fighting, but then the ad starts unwillingly collapsing. His best friend is dead, another is POW, a third one was crushed by a machine gun. He speaks about phantom limb pain so bad he slept in 90-minute intervals while painkillers did nothing. That is not a slogan. That is a medical fact that no propaganda can refute. Then the truth slips out quietly. In part 2, both men, both combat veterans, say the unsayable. Enough. Let's negotiate. No more fighting. Stop imagining river crossings and Odessa parades like their weekend errands. If anyone demands more blood after a ceasefire, Lugovoy says, roll over them like asphalt. Listen to the tone. They are not pacifists clutching white flags. They're military men admitting to a body count too large to comprehend for regular people. Then another voice, historian Artyom Drabkin, the same guy who made his name recording World War II accounts without varnish. Well, he now interviews special military operation veterans in a fog of euphemisms. A captain's antics, a march company, a trail of crimes swallowed by the passive voice. I mean, everyone in the room taking this interview, they all know what antics means. Everyone understands why the language turns slippery, because precise nouns under this regime are booby traps. One wrong word and you are not a historian anymore. You are defended in court, facing 20, 30, 40-year sentence. And yet, the truth still sneaks in. It always does. A grenade in the grocery store, a pit for the disobedient wounded, contracts with no end, a company that goes from 179 to 17 because a general read only one single sentence in the briefing, take at all costs, a veteran who cannot sleep for months because his leg still screams at him in the dark. Put these fragments together and you do not need a manifesto to know where you stand. This war is now telling on itself, to the mouse that meant to glorify it, through the clips meant to recruit the next wave, through the cleaned up interviews where the most important facts are smuggled in as asides, half swears, and cutaway glances. Families ask prosecutors for mercy and just hear the word neutralized whispered back like a curse. You don't have to be an activist to recoil anymore. You only have to be awake. You just have to be listening, even to those people that the regime cherishes. The veterans who still support the cause cannot completely hide their exhaustion, and those who don't are learning a new language of caution that just not to get a sentence without the handcuffs. But even with the euphemisms, the math wins. 3.5 years of temporary war and thousands of dead turned to administrative disputes and endless paperwork. I mean, it just should say something. Would you help, guys? If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to see the additional chapter in the end, please subscribe to my Patreon. All the videos will have additional chapters there. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.